Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Ferris Makes Demos. I thought I'd do something a little different today. I've done this actually once before, I think. But basically, I'm in the middle of working on a bunch of tool stuff. And I think what I'm going to do is just kind of continue what I'm doing. However, I need a little bit more space than I normally have. So I think what I'm going to do, whoops, and I totally forgot to set this up beforehand. But what I think I want to do is actually just show my entire screen. Now I know that this kind of sucks as a viewer because like there's no way you're going to be able to read this code and stuff. And you know what? I think I'm just okay with that. So sorry if that's annoying. I know that folks probably won't get as much out of this, but I just kind of thought, why don't I just continue what I'm doing and just open it up for people to see anyway. So I think that's what we're going to do. So I have a bit of a different setup here with the chat on the right instead of what I can normally see. But I think this will work. So yeah, I'm just going to get started. A little bit of background. By the way, unrelated, I've noticed that sometimes I have network issues if my computer's been typically asleep for a while. Turns out I don't need to reboot my whole system. I just need to reset my network adapter. So that's actually pretty cool. Hey, WhisterTube. Whoops. Anyway, I'm working on the demo tool and a couple things. So I think this is mostly stuff you guys have seen before. Hey, Zakor. There's, of course, our sequencer. This is our demo dope on wax with a bunch of stuff removed because due to what I'm working on. And I started on the new sequencer. It has some test clips in here, but nothing that's actually working. This is still animation data from Rocket, even though the sequencer isn't being used to control time right now. We're using the scrubbing here. So I can scrub through existing animation data, but I actually don't have any animation data in the main tool yet still. But yeah, things work. There's an extra cube everywhere, which I'll get to. So I think the first major change I did is I took the operator editor and I adjusted some like alignments here, but I also made the inspector, instead of being at the top, I put it on the right as is more typical, and laid out all the different expressions in a more typical way. I made the font a bit smaller, so this is a bit nicer. I actually should have done this a long time ago because the number of these and the length of these started getting pretty long. So if I can find an example, most of these aren't too bad, but even simple stuff like describing rotations and stuff like this, a lot easier to see when I can just kind of scroll it out like this. I know it's like way too small for you guys to see probably with this 4K setup, but I kind of need this much space to work with this stuff, or at least I feel like I do. And typically what I do is when I'm streaming is I only use this upper right hand 1080p corner of my setup, and then also bump up the font size. But I'm touching a lot of files at once, so I'm going to jump around a lot, and then it really helps to have a 4K screen. Also, you guys might notice I switched to VS Code. I've been using this at work for actually like the last 2 jobs I've had. So for quite a while, even though I barely know how to use it really. But I figured it was time to switch at home as well. Yeah. But yeah, so I moved this. I changed the inspector. It looks a bit different. I think it's a bit more clear. But other than that, it works the same way. So if I go to, or mostly the same way, let's find an example here. Make this larger. Hey, BitNenfer. So this is, for example, a statue. I think that's it's a scene called Bubble Boy, which is down here. I should actually add a search for this at some point, but I think I actually won't, because this whole operator editor is going to become second to the node stuff that I started like a year ago and then worked on for like a couple weeks and then stopped. Now I'm working on it again and actually getting editor support for that. But anyway, this has a few different versions of this mesh here. So if we remove some of this, I think it's this one. Yeah, this is the points we can get rid of. This is all like the ornament stuff. This is the wires. We can get rid of that. This is the low poly one, which is these kind of bits that poke out. We can get rid of that. Then we just have the main mesh itself. Yeah, and they're German. I totally shaved. I got really sick of getting beard in my mustache. And I also thought, after watching the Meteoric video, that I looked like a homeless piece of shit. So I decided to shave. Hey, Alkama. Yeah, I know it'll come back. I like to just shave the whole thing instead of trying to like make it clean, because it's just a waste of time, I feel like. So every so often I do this. In a couple weeks I'll look somewhat normal again. Anyway, so now we just have this one mesh in this scene here. You also notice, because I've been playing with TAA for a couple streams, and this does not have that right now, which is very much intentional. It does have some of the screen space reflections and stuff that was already in the demo, but yeah. Yeah, I do look so much younger. It's funny. Anyway, so this version of the mesh, I think, is this high res one. So the only thing I added is I changed sliders for some of these parameters. The only parameter that actually made sense for the operators was the subdivisions for mesh, because it was very clear what the bounds for this were. And the point of this was not really to give much of a better, like more usability to the operator editor, because I want to kind of move away from that. Like I still want to use this as like a lower level representation, but I'm adding a node, like a layer of nodes on top that are going to compile down to this representation. And so for those, I actually want to expose sort of more proper properties, I should say, and then expose better editors for those properties. But since I already had this inspector for the operator, I thought I would touch it up a bit while doing work that I would need to do for the nodes also. So I kind of use this as like a guinea pig setup for those changes. And then now that I've started the actual node editor, by basically forking the operator editor, and I'll show that in a second, I'll also do the same thing for the inspector. So they're operated on a slightly different data model, but at least I figured out kind of how this editor is going to be architected and how this works. So this slider actually does work, and I can change the subdivisions. This would have been a lot nicer when we're actually working on the demo. You can see a funny thing about this subdivision is because this subdivides, every triangle becomes 4 triangles, I think it was, because it's just regular loop subdivision. If I crank this to the max, it takes a little while. And the other thing that's kind of funny that happens is the mesh just becomes a complete mess, and that's because I actually use 16-bit indices for the compressed mesh and everything, and so we overflow, and then this is what happens, which is kind of funny. But I keep it because it doesn't actually hurt anything, and that just means on some meshes that are fairly large to begin with, that can happen. But on some of the smaller meshes, that won't happen. And practically speaking, we won't subdivide a mesh more than like this anyway, because it only really looks low poly because it's flat shaded anyway. So I feel like this is a decent range of values. And then this is just no subdivision. So this is the actual how polygonized the mesh actually is before we compress it. And even that's a couple kilobytes because meshes are big, as it turns out. It's kind of funny doing it with this head though, because let's see. Just gonna expand this out here. This is I don't think it's cube head. I think that's a different one. Not Deer Boys, not Bubble Boy. I don't remember what these scenes are called. I need better navigation stuff here. But again, not going to invest too much more in this editor. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is not it. That's a different scene. Did I have another row of scenes? Yes, I do actually. Pandacles, this is the one. Yeah, because I copied the particles from Trash Panda and then continued from there. Yeah, exactly, Zakor. Let's see. I think these are the lights. Yeah. Suddenly got dark. And which part of this? Rings. Yeah, these are the background rings, I think. Yep. And this is the rendering, I think. Yeah, that's what's going to change is the mesh, which I don't actually know where that is here. It's actually really helpful to have these color coded because then I can basically just look for that. In addition, they have these like abbreviations for what they are at the beginning. Again, the font is tiny, like even on the 4K monitor, but that was very much intentional because you end up with a lot of these. This is the SSBO. I thought it would be over here somewhere, yet I'm not seeing it. I don't think I would have had this somewhere else. I mean, this is the binding for the data, but where's the data? It's called Pandicles Mesh. So I don't think it's going to be very far. I also need to have like middle click to move around in here. That'll definitely do for the nodes. Yeah, no worries, guys. I know this is kind of ridiculous. But I'm going to be stubborn about it. You know, another thing I could do here is I could actually... This is going to be kind of funny. Where did that open up? Here. I can find it. Pentacles mesh. Type mesh. 36 and 90. So apparently this is right underneath Pandicle subroutine. It should be here. Oh yeah, it is right here. Mesh, there we go. Yeah, so this mesh, for example, if we turn down the subdivision, you can see it gets real chunky, and I think it only emits particles from, I thought it was the middle of the triangles, but it might actually be the vertices. I don't remember how I wrote the shader, so there you go. So in the original sort of form of the mesh, without subdivisions, you can see how low poly this mesh actually is. And of course, we do have connectivity information, so I could actually render a mesh with this, but we only use the points. We actually store everything else, so that's a bit wasteful in this case. But then as I subdivide more and more, we have more positions that the particles come from. And yeah, that's what we have in the intro, so fairly high. I think the next highest is the max. But this mesh, as you can see, it doesn't actually break like that other mesh did. Or actually it might because we're not rendering faces, but yeah. That's kind of fun. And of course, undoing everything still works, although it takes a minute when we have to undo through one of those subdivisions. You see, this just changes like crazy because it's changing the selection as I move around. There we got to the end of it. So anyway, that's to really say that I just kind of changed this inspector. But what I'm really working on is this new node editor. And the idea is actually going to be that the operators are going to be kind of hidden away, and instead of the operator inspector, which like, again, the operator's view is going to be in the tool, but most of the time a user isn't going to use that. And the users are basically me and the rest of Logicoma. So it's not a big user base, but still need to think of it as like a different perspective than just me. Because again, one of the biggest issues with this operator approach is it's really nice, and it's nice to have like a VM that can run everything for the 64Ks, and we can change the CPU code like on the fly, which I'm really happy with. We also describe the whole renderer in this. But for composing scenes, I need something higher level because it's just too tedious to work in that representation. So I want to have some kind of nodes that compile down to that. So far, I just have 4 nodes, which I know you guys can't see. They're a little bit bigger if I view the operators again side by side, because they're also going to have these connections, which right now it doesn't visualize what these connections are called or what's connected to what. But essentially what I have is I have 4 nodes here. This one is like a root, which it doesn't really do anything other than it's the root. It's where compilation starts. Then there's a scene. Beneath that, there's a cube, and then the cube has a material. And I don't have a working inspector for any of the properties on here, but I do have some test properties. So this material actually does come from Actually, I think that's just from the compilation right now. I don't think I've exposed proper properties for that. Maybe I have. I don't remember. And then these are all connected together. So additional scenes would also be here. I also need to make this like hierarchical, so you can see you can embed node graphs and other node graphs and things like that. So I'm not entirely sure how that embedding is going to work from data model perspective yet, but I'll figure that out. So yes, this editor, I basically forked the operator editor, and so far all the only thing that I've actually been able to support is rendering, which it does render actual nodes here, and then selection. But if I try to like move the selection, well, if I move it to where it was, it doesn't matter. If I move it somewhere else, then bang, the tool dies. And you guys can't read this, but it says thread panicked at not implemented, and it gives me the line, which happens to correspond with the correct tool code. So I just haven't implemented that yet. So that's kind of how far I am. Something that I don't know if it was clear, but this actually is starting to work. This is real nodes, at least test nodes, and real compilation to additional operators. So if I, for example, double click here, this actually changes the route where it starts compilation to a different position on this grid. And again, you can't read that, but you can see the screen goes blank, and that's because node compilation failed. So there's like 2 compilation steps now. The nodes compiled to the operators, and then that gets merged with the operators that are in the tool editor, and then that goes through the operator compilation like we've always had. And then that's normally what produces like the JIT code and then all of the asset metadata and everything that we need. But now it says node compilation error, no node at root position. And it doesn't show you where the error is at the moment. It would if this were an operator compilation error in the operator editor, for example. Right now, it just reports the error as operator 00, which I need to fix. But it's pretty cool. Anyway, if I double click on this, I think then we can see it actually worked in node compilation, but then we have an op compile error. It says undefined subroutine, check this out. And the reason is because this root node is called check this out, and if we look at the operators, there's a subroutine call here to a subroutine called check this out, and that's what actually puts the pieces of code together. This gets compiled down to operators that represent a subroutine, and then in the normal operator graph, I just have a call to a subroutine like I would any other call, and it calls the subroutine that's generated by this compilation. So that's how the pieces fit, and that's going to go both ways. Like that's going to be kind of the main interface. There might be globals that are defined in the main operator graph. And then you might refer to them in the generated code from here. And eventually, I think I talked about this, that I wanted like the node compilation to be expressed in like Lua or something scriptable, because the point of that is that what nodes mean and which nodes there are and what kind of properties they have should change with the project, just like we do with all the renderer and everything. But so far, as a proof of concept, I've just done all that compilation in Rust in the main tool. After having tried that, since I like writing compilers in Rust, I think I might actually use some Rust live reload stuff to do that as well, instead of using an actual scripting language. But we'll see, because at least the tests that I added in Lua were actually pretty nice. Hi, Nusan. Sorry, I just saw your message. Yeah, I think it'll be cool to have like this low level representation and the high level one. And then the other parts of this is, of course, the whole tool doesn't really work without a text editor, which is by design. So the shaders that you import via this graph, you also modify by hand in like a text editor. But I also want to change the shader. So I have these program operators here. So if I pull up the operating inspector again, I know you guys can't really see this, but there's a vert, geom, and frag expressions, and these point to files right now. But I think I might prefix these with like file : or something, and then I might do another version of these kind of expressions where it says like, I don't know, verbatim or text or something, and then you'll have the actual shader text inline. And the reason I want to do that is because then the node compilation can actually generate shader code as well, and because shaders also support this include syntax, which will also do like file watching down the tree. You could kind of have the part of the node compilation be to generate like the top level shader that will like stitch a bunch of other pieces together, for example. So I think this is going to be really effective. Like I imagine, for example, for a custom material, you would generate your own vertex and fragment shaders, or maybe even just like a fragment shader, and then you'd use a standard vertex shader that goes with that, and or maybe some other compilation would change what uses that. But the idea would be like if I wanted to change some properties on this material, or maybe instead of like this would be like a standard material node, but I might make another node that's some kind of custom one, and then I would define the compilation for that to have like some expression operators beneath that, that I could, throw things together, like add noise and tweak that and everything in the node editor, and then compilation would compile that down to a string of shader code that would also including other bits as well. So it's I think this is at least the tool that I want, especially with a lot of this like shader generation stuff. I think it's going to really make my life a lot easier. But at some point you just have to sit down and write the damn tools. And I did that like 4 years ago when writing all of this operator stuff for the original tooling that we had then, that kind of became this tool eventually, and powered all of our intros so far, except backscatter, which was before all this tech. But yeah, now it's time to kind of add the level on top. So yeah, so for the most part, I think typical users just going to see the nodes, and then they're, instead of seeing the operator inspector, they're going to see a node inspector, which is going to look basically identical. But of course, it's going to reflect whatever's selected here. And one thing you'll notice is that these already kind of play together in the sense that like, so selection is only one or the other. And so you can see if I undo, because selection is part of the undo stack in this tool, you can see that as I undo and redo, different parts get selected in the different editors. So all that is appearing to work. And that's one of the reasons why this stuff takes so long, is just hooking everything up properly. I think I've spent, I guess not that long, but basically most of my evenings for the last couple of weeks, except Easter weekend where I wasn't at home. So yeah, I think that's enough background. That's basically what I'm doing. So I think the next things that I wanted to do, just playing with this editor already, obviously like I need to be able to move these around and create and connect things, but I think even just basically moving these around is my next step, because it's easy for me to create some default nodes here first that I can kind of play around with and get all that stuff figured out. And then for actual node creation, I want to have some kind of palette view where you can maybe even with search find different nodes to create. I guess worst case, what I can do is I can just make a custom context menu that if I right click on an empty position, for example, there's going to be a create op menu that will just have like categories, and then underneath those the actual nodes, which is probably good enough for the small team that we have using this. And again, a big motivator for this system is that I want to have custom nodes for different effects too. So like in Dope on Wax, we had a lot of these particle systems, or there was this like wax effect that did this polygonization via surface nets, and then figuring out the content that actually gets polygonized. It'd be great if I could compose some basic nodes. So I did some really basic SDF stuff. So you can imagine just some SDF nodes that would describe the same shapes, but that I could edit in this kind of high level view instead of in actual shader code. That would be really nice, and it would give other people on the team more of an opportunity to be able to contribute to those kind of visuals just by playing with stuff in a way that currently is a bit prohibitive for them right now. And then like that, again, that's just two examples, but I could just make custom nodes that are only valid for one effect for one demo, which I think is going to be really likely. And that's kind of been one of the reasons I went with such a low level approach with the operators, is because I want to have like a VM that could just kind of handle whatever I was going to throw at it. Because we have changed how the renderer works for every demo, for example. And it's nice to be able to do that in different projects. If I come up with some crazy idea, if I want to test TA or whatever, I should be able to do that just kind of in a demo project, not necessarily shutting down all the tools and everything. So I think it's been a success so far. I think if I had started from scratch, I probably would have started at this node level of abstraction and worked down rather than the other way. But considering we already have the lower level runtime now, I kind of like the idea of going back up. By the way, hi Winter Squirrel. Sorry I didn't say hi earlier. Your name ended up being the same color as Aaron the German, so I thought I just parsed it as the same person. By the way, who's ever following me, thank you so much. Neurosis, it looks like. I just noticed that I heard that sound I didn't before. So if someone else did, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I can't see my OBS right now because I don't have another monitor other than this big one. By the way, am I out of the way of the code? Yeah, for the most part. Doesn't really matter anyway. You guys can't read this. It's like 11-point font on a 4K monitor that I'm broadcasting downscale to 1080p, so there's no hope. But yeah, the whole point of this tool as well is I didn't want to lock myself into any paradigm, or if I wanted to change the material system, I wanted to be able to do that just by changing stuff in the project, and ideally never restarting the tool, which generally has been true. I think that's worked really well. But again, it's too low level. Like if we look at this operator graph again, if I just make this my whole thing, this is the dope on wax operator graph, and the renderer, for example, is all this stuff on the right here. In fact, this is the main description of the pipeline with all the different stages and all the different like bindings for those stages. And then this fans out a bit because like here's the SSR, like additional fan out stuff for the SSR. This is for depth of field here. This is stuff for bloom. And then this is stuff for just rendering objects, which you can see they basically always have the same structure. But the only real difference between any of these is these two operators here, which basically determine which shape it is. And the rest is all the actual binding and everything. So this is the perfect thing to be able to instead generate with compiled operators instead of actually having these here. Whereas up here, and yeah, some of this downscale stuff I think I would also generate. Whereas up here, it's actually kind of nice to be able to click around in here and modify this stuff at this level of abstraction. I think also if I had started this from scratch, I would have done this as a textual representation in the tool, like some kind of scripting language, and still gone with the VM approach. But I actually kind of like having this spatial because it kind of makes it nice to navigate. So what I imagine is I would keep basically all this stuff from here on up. I would basically keep, but then this stuff down here I would generate, and out here these are the different scenes. So for example, this is called tube logos. This is at the beginning of the intro. I mean, it's this scene you see here, although it wouldn't have the cube, which right now comes from the nodes. So if I remove that, this is the tube logo scene, and if we just take a look at some of the things here, like if I remove basically everything, that's not everything because we still have these forms here. I can make this a bit bigger. So we can start adding stuff. So I think this is the background gradient. And then this column is the actual effect, I think. And then these columns are different lights. So you can see like the nice thing about this is that I'm sitting here composing different units. So like I obviously have a renderer that allows me to compose lights and objects in a scene expressed in this operator graph. But you can also see that I'm moving around a lot of nodes to do that. It's kind of the point. This is a subtle environment map. This is some background objects that I forgot I had in here. That's kind of funny. I'll leave those in there. And then this is the overlays, the gradients on top. And then if I want to tweak something on here, so the first thing is that this takes up a lot of space, and I have to do like a lot of this stuff by hand. Like if I want to add a new light, I actually have to like add a new subroutine and then make space over here and then create the subroutine. And then normally I would just copy stuff. So for example, if I wanted to add one of these lights, I can move this out of the way. I can copy this, and then that breaks compilation because there's already something called light 3. So I add light 4, and then I go in here and I copy this light 3 and I add light 4. So now I've copied the light, which isn't, I guess, too bad. And then to change it, I have to mess with its world matrix, which is not great. We can do, I don't know, make 10, just to make it be pointed from somewhere else. And then I don't know where this is, or what this color thing is, so I'll crank up this color. So apparently there's a really bright orange light. And if I want to change the color, like I have to go in these individual components, which really sucks. So we're going to fix a lot of that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I have composable stuff here, but it's too low level. That's really my point, and you can very clearly see that with just a small demonstration. Whereas if I had expressed the same thing as a node, I would drag in a new node that would be a light node, and it would actually represent this exact same thing, but all of that would be on one node, and all of the properties that I've exposed here in this little stack would be exposed as properties on the node. And so it'd be a lot easier for me to modify things and edit things. So that's kind of the idea. At least composing scenes needs to be done at a higher level of abstraction. This light is really bright. It's kind of funny. You can see these shadows look like ass. Not the fun kind either. Anyway, so that's like my whole motivation and everything. And the node compilation itself and the definitions is relatively simple, I think. Because yeah, it's also the node definitions that need to be part of the project, but right now they're just hacked into the tool. I have, no, that's in model store. So these are my node definitions currently. I have the definition for a root node, the definition for a scene node, and they basically contain which what I call the input ports. So right now nodes only have thanks for the sub, Dark Second, really appreciate it. So the nodes have like a reference to themselves, which is on the top left corner, and then on the bottom they'll have what I call input ports, and those are things that you can connect other nodes to. I might actually add another way to connect, like to have a node have multiple sort of outputs, especially I think when we make like nodes that you can collapse into other nodes in other parts of the node graph. I think that'll be necessary, but right now they only have references to nodes themselves, which is so far good enough. So I'll start with that and then expand it later. But yeah, then we have like a cube, and then the material node, for example, does actually have all these parameters. But there's no way to edit them or expose them in the tool yet. I need to build that. But they do have default values, and then the compilation right now, I think, is in... Where is that? I'm not actually sure. This is actually the default graph that you see there. So these are the individual nodes. It's fairly small. But it's only 4 nodes and the connections. But where is the compilation again? Oh yeah, that's in a new project I added here called Botch. You can guess why it's called that. And that's in this nodes folder here. So again, the data structure is to describe all that, and then the compiler is this code right now. And this. So not much. Mostly it's in this compile node code, which, I mean, I want this to be really arbitrary. So all of these node definitions and this definition for how to compile them is all going to be in a separate script or Rust project somewhere. That's going to be part of the project. So yeah, I think this is a good idea, and I think so far the editor stuff is going well, but it does take a lot of time. And one of the things that I haven't dealt with yet in this tool is really having multiple editors. I think I started with the sequencer and being able to move time around, but that's basically all it does. So I've started to kind of segregate some of the behavior in the tool. The tool is a mix of Rust and C++. So the main data model stuff is in Rust, and then I have this C API that the Rust layer exposes that is then captured by C or consumed by C. So this is the C API definition for that entire layer, and everything is captured here. So this ends up being fairly large. But mostly these functions are like trivial to implement. There's just a lot of them. And they cover like everything. They cover all of the introspection for like, here's all the stuff to get all the information about operators. Here's some stuff to get information about the sequencer here, and sequencer clips. Oops. I have this open next to it. That's kind of funny. Here's all the stuff to get information about nodes. And you can see there's stuff commented out that I forked from the operators that I still need to do here. For example, getting properties. And then down here is like all of the sort of ways you can mutate it. So you can create a new project, open a new project, create a new operator, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, I think I still also have some stuff to get like the current project name in here somewhere. Yeah, file name stuff down here. The order of this needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but that's fine. So then this is, of course, then consumed by this editor context class, which then just wraps the C API in a C++ class. And then from there, I make what I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, would consider a questionable decision, because I basically add some OOP bullshit on top of this. So here I add some additional interfaces. So for example, like iModel. And this is a purely abstract class. The whole reason is just to kind of codify, here's all the stuff to do the ops. That's actually a bad example, because iModel used to cover the whole model, but now as I'm sort of segregating it into different parts of the model, for example, the ops, the nodes, and the sequencer, I'm kind of splitting it up. So now like there's iNode model that I split out from that. This only has to do with nodes. There's iSelection that has to do with only the selection state. And there's also another, for every one of these, like iNode model, there's also iNode model mutator. And then this is a separate interface to be able to actually change the node model in the tool. And none of this is necessary for to actually make the thing work. It's just I like the idea of having different parts of this interface very well segregated. And it's mostly communication tools for me because I look at, okay, here's the API that I've made so far to change nodes. So it's kind of an organizational technique to split it up like this. And then whenever I have an editor, so for example, the node editor, this actually contains only the parts, only the interfaces for the parts of the model that it will ever touch. And again, that's mostly for my own benefit because I see that, okay, the node editor right now, it will look at the node model, it will mutate the node model, it will look at selection, it will mutate selection. And I know that because that's the interfaces that this relies on, without looking at any more of the code. So it's definitely verbose, I'm not gonna lie. But seeing as I don't change the stuff very often, like in the last 4 years, this is basically one of the only times I've really hacked on it since I did this in 2016. So, and came up with most of the ideas for this architecture. So it's not too bad. But of course, as part of this, I've now been doing that. Like this used to all just be under this I model. Now I'm splitting up into node model, iSelection, all that kind of stuff. In fact, I model will go away. This is still a catch-all. Right now, you can see that there's only operator stuff and only sequencer stuff in here. And then some op error stuff, which should be reorganized. So this will become iOp model, and there's also going to be an iSequencer model, which I just haven't done that split yet. But that's the plan. So, but I think ultimately the way that the nodes are going to work and how they're going to connect is like there is some like type information about nodes and how you can connect them based on the ports that they have, and then there's each of those node types also has like a list of properties, and each property has metadata on how it can be presented in the inspector. So really, I think this is going to be a very well-contained editor. And then everything else is all going to be part of like node compilation. And also which types there are. So all that's kind of separable. So the editor only has to care about like being able to create nodes that are available to be created based on the available types. And then moving nodes around and connecting them. And that's all kind of separate from what that actually means in compilation, which is defined by the project. So I think the scope of this is still fairly small. And of course, there's a sequencer, which I also want to work on. Like I really want to have this node editor and the new sequencer in before we make the new demo, the next intro. And I think like we've been talking about doing, I think 2 intros this year, which I would actually love to do because I think last year we only did 1. This year, technically, Hoffman already did one, which was great. If you guys haven't seen that, it was called Way Too Rude, I think, which is a Logicoma and Looney's release. That was almost all Hoffman, or at least he was the driving force, I should say. At least from our group, it was all Hoffman. But then, of course, Farfar's an excellent designer, helped out a lot, and then so did Blueberry, who made most of like the engine. Or rather, the visual engine, I should say, because Hoffman also did the Amiga synth that was used in that. So he was pretty busy. But yeah, we've been talking about doing 2 this year. And if that happens, we'll have a release at Solskogen and then one at Tursock. And I'm not really giving anything away by saying this, I feel like. So I think that would be cool. It may not happen, but at least I want to use that as motivation to work on the tool. And also part of that is motivation. Like I was working on this a bit before Easter, but I'm definitely also motivated by winning our 3rd 64K Meteoric in a row, which I'm really stoked about. I think there were a lot of awesome 64Ks this year, so I had no idea that we would get it. I hoped we would, of course, but I can think of a couple others that could have deserved it too. I actually don't know what the Japanese intro text in that demo mean. Yeah, I have no idea. Hoffman told me, because I don't remember. I'm not going to pull it up now just because of the window setup that I have. But Like I know katakana, so I could make the sounds that it made, but I had no idea what it meant because I'm weeb trash. But yeah, similarly to how, like looking back on Logicoma, if you look at, for example, Elysian, I don't know if this was obvious from from the other side, but Elysian was kind of a tool test, and then Engage was like the first larger production that we did. And I've always liked that approach. Like you kind of, like I like to do intros in pairs is kind of my point. And I kind of feel like this year might be the same for us, depending on how productive we actually end up being. At least that's what I'm thinking right now. Yeah, if they don't know, I have no idea. No idea what that means. But yeah, I was mostly working on FPGA stuff earlier in the year, but then I got really motivated by that. And it totally doesn't help that both CPDT and YX have mentioned on the Logicoma Twitter that they're coming for us. So got to defend the title. I mean, you win 3 of those in a row, like it's kind of a waste if you don't go for 4, right? I mean, I don't mean to sound cocky about that at all, because I definitely think there's obviously very capable groups that could have had it this last year and could have had it the years before too. So like, I don't mean to take that lightly. What I do mean is like, we keep pushing ourselves every time, and we will continue to do that. That's really what I mean. I don't think we're a shoo-in at all. I don't think this is going to be easy. But I will definitely say that since people have said they're coming for us, we will 100% not make their job easy. They did themselves a disservice by saying that. I'll say that. But obviously they're very talented. Otherwise I wouldn't care. And I want to see more intros. And I want to make more intros. So that's why we're doing this. But yes, the whole reason I have all this in a way you can't read is so I can actually get to work on some of this stuff. So I should probably start doing that. So I think I need to refactor some of this code, but we're not going to worry about that. This is the real tool code, and this is real work. So I think the first thing I want to do is moving the nodes. Cut, copy, and paste is going to be a bit of work because I don't have serialization done yet either for these nodes. So like if I saved or loaded the project, there's no way to actually get the real nodes. No worries there in the German. Thanks for hanging out. So yeah, so I don't want to look at serialization yet, but obviously that's something I'll have to look into soon. I think I'll look into actually moving the selection. So that's this case. Bang. This 534, which is right here. So the nice thing is that I have all this implemented for ops already. That's if I actually was a split left. And I can move this here. And I can look at the move ops selection code. I'll just copy some of this to start out with. Some of this, like how it recompiles and updates the history and everything, I should definitely refactor. But yeah. I think as well, actually, this is wrong. Because this should actually only deal with moving the selection, assuming that it's operators. So I'm actually going to trash basically all of this. So if the selection is indeed an operator selection, then we do this. Otherwise, we get this unreachable, which means very much a tool code error. So I'll do the same here. This will just be nodes. And everything else that has to do with this will be bad news. And I think I have some other ops that do that too. Op selection. No, these ones actually have to be this way. Like cut selection, copy selection will have to do with individual types. So I think that's okay. Same with delete selection. Yes, that looks good to me. Hey, Add Entropy. You missed all the explanation of what I'm doing. And a lot of other explanation. But I'm just working on the tool. And since I'm doing some of this tool work and touching a lot of files, we're just going to do this in 4K. And I won't be doing this in a way that's as viewer friendly as normal, but I just thought I'd turn on the camera and hang out while I'm doing this. This is not a very normal kind of stream for me, but since I'm making a lot of progress on this lately, I figured this would be the best thing for me to move this project forward and then be able to get to more useful stuff in later streams and also get working on new demos ASAP. All right, so to actually move these nodes, just like to move the ops, I think what I did here is I just took all the other ops that were there in the selection and I pulled them out of the data model. We're going to basically do the same with the nodes, except connections need to be preserved. So I think one thing I'm actually going to do is do this in two parts. I think I'm going to have the model here, and I think I'm going to remove the connections that are here in this dummy model. So we'll just go ahead and basically replace all of these. So now all the connections are empty. So then we should only have to deal with actually moving the nodes. So I run this. Takes several seconds to build. And one of the reasons is because we basically have to run this in release. Otherwise it's too slow to do like anything. Then, yeah, so now I think I'm a bit surprised that this compiled actually. I guess that makes sense because if there's no connections, then this is just like an empty root, so that's probably okay. Ooh, that's weird. That this. I guess that makes sense actually because now we don't have any way for that to crash because now the code just does nothing and then updates the history. So that's kind of funny. That's why it's running at least, and I guess compilation's okay because yeah, again that just represents an empty scene, so that should actually be valid. I actually kind of want to look at the current compilation to double check that. And that's in Botch again here. Yeah, if it just doesn't have a connection, it just won't do anything. So it'll still make a subroutine and end that subroutine. It'll just be empty. So that makes sense. So yeah, I'll add a to-do move. Update import connections as well as nodes. But yeah, what I do with the operators is basically I just remove them from the list of operators and put them in this new structure. And the nice thing is that I give relative x and y to this function, so I don't need to figure out like what's the top left node. Everything's on a grid, so makes it really easy to kind of move things around. That's definitely a design choice that I made for making the editor code simpler. So I just need to remove those nodes from the model and then reinsert them at the new positions. So it should be pretty simple. And then, yeah, there's one other caveat here, which is to do update node root pause if applicable, because these nodes have this root position, which is where compilation starts. And if we move the node that represents the root node, we should also update that position to make sure that's okay. Another way to represent this, because I actually have a map from position to the nodes, which it made a lot of sense for the operators, and I'm kind of just copying it for the nodes. Otherwise, I would have to do like IDs or pointers or something. And in Rust, doing pointers like that is not very nice. I would have to have like internal mutability or something weird. I just don't want to do that. So I'm gonna stick with the same kind of representation where it's this map from position to node, and that's gonna make it kind of annoying when we move the connections, because we have to update everything to point to the new nodes. But I honestly think like cut, copy, paste, and move are basically the only things that actually have to deal with that. So I think it won't be too bad. So yeah, we just do the same thing. Let mute moved nodes. I'll just more or less copy the code that I have for operators. For position in selected nodes dot iter. Yeah, because the selected nodes should be, if we look at model, or the selection is nodes, just a hash set of these positions, so that's great. Then yeah, we'll do let node is self.model.nodes.remove. And again, we assume that, like I have all these things that edit the model, assume that the tool did something that it was allowed to do. I don't like to have error checking everywhere and be really defensive with this kind of stuff, especially on a smaller project like this where it's just me. So we'll do pull out the node at that position. Yeah, it looks like I calculate the new position here. Why not, I guess. So we do position.0 as I32 plus relative x, and then as U32. I used usize before because I always used to do that for essentially meaning uint, which I later didn't like that pattern anymore, so I don't do that anymore. Now it's U32. I will update the operator code for that later, but not now. So then moved ops.insert, and we insert new position op. This should actually be node, not op. So update the position, which we're not actually going to do now, so that's fine. Oops. I'm not entirely sure why I do this in this order, actually. But that's fine. We clear the selected nodes, and then I add in the other ones. So for pause up in moved ops.into iter, we're going to consume these here as we put them in the actual model again. So self.model.nodes.insert pause.clone. Actually, that should just be pause, but maybe for some reason didn't like that. And then the node. Oh, that's why, because the selection, I put it back in there. That's why I cloned that here. That's fine. So then it's, yeah, selected nodes.insert position. Oh, that's why I do it, because to determine where this root position is, I check the selected ones before I clear the selection. That's why I do it in that order. Then I agree with this. I think this is fine. So I'll test this. And with this, I should be able to move the nodes around unless I messed it up by, for example, calling moved nodes moved ops. And yeah, I called this op as well, which that should be node. Yeah, so now I can move these around. If I move one over another, it'll just like override it, which is the behavior that I want. But you can see it doesn't change where the compilation starts when I move all this around. So that's kind of the next thing. I can move this and then select this top one, and then it works. So, so far what's there seems to work. Again, if I bring up the operators, I can do all kinds of crazy stuff here. Start moving everything around. But there's no way to create new nodes or anything. And then this should all be undoable. And it totally is. So that's actually great. So that's the first part. And then, yeah, we want to update this root position. So that's just if selected nodes dot contains. Yeah, these are just positions. So that's why we do this. So do self dot model dot node root position. I'll just copy this code. Did I just delete something? What is happening? Like this. And master pos is not what it's called for the nodes. Whoops. This is called node root pos, and then as u size is going to be u32 here. Hey Moon, yeah. Yeah, definitely not great for a viewer, but I thought I'd just turn on the camera and hang out while working on normal tool stuff. So now this should move this position as well. That only happens if the selection actually contained that position when we were doing the move. So that's the logic there. So this works. Now we're able to actually move the nodes. Now, of course, this would not work if we also did the connections, which is why I removed those. So let's bring those back. Because we're going to have to fix that too. I'm glad you enjoy add entropy. I like sharing this stuff. I think this is the second time I've done this where I just go full 4K. Normally I put up with a smaller editor, but when doing, yeah, there we go. It actually panicked in that case, which actually makes sense. Because I think it tried to find out which nodes were at the positions of these connections. If I do this, maybe it still works? Yeah, probably not. Yeah, so now this totally breaks, which is expected. But yeah, sometimes when doing some of this editor stuff, I'm going to end up touching a lot of files, and then it just makes sense to have all my screen real estate. So I'm not entirely sure how I want to handle these connections. I mean, actually, it's probably not going to be that bad at all, because since we always move by this relative amount, actually, there is kind of an issue. So for one thing, if we only had these operators to worry about, this would basically be trivial. Because since we just pull out the nodes, we could also they would just keep these connections, and we would just update the node that they point to. However, the node that they point to, one, might not be part of our selection that we're moving. So in that case, we would need to not update it. And then the other thing is that moving nodes might move nodes over other nodes, which would then replace them. And then all the connections that pointed to those nodes need to be removed. So we need to figure out which nodes are going to be removed by this move. We need to remove any connections to those. The connections from those will be removed with the node itself. And then we need to move the nodes and make sure that their connections, that all connections that pointed, because there also might be connections that point to it that weren't part of the selection, need to be updated. So I think to do break connections that point to nodes that will be removed by move, we need to update connections that point to moved nodes something like that. So the nice thing here is we have the selected nodes, which represents like the current positions of all the selected nodes. We have the moved ones, which is going to represent not only the nodes that have so far been moved, but also where they're going to be. And I think we also remove the selection from this original set here. Now the nice thing is that all of the moved nodes will survive. We know that for sure. So actually this update connections that point to moved nodes, this is probably the easiest thing to do. Because I think what we can do is just go over all the nodes before doing anything else. And if they point to one of these selected nodes, if any of these connections point to the selected nodes, we can just update that. And then breaking these other connections might be more complicated. But I like the idea of updating them first, because then we don't have to worry about them throughout the rest of this. So yes, we'll go for pause in selected nodes. Actually, that's not what we want. We want to do for node in self.model.nodes.itermute. So this will actually be position and node. And we need to do for input port connection in node.input port connections.itermute. And this should be fine because we're splitting the borrow. We have the selection here and then the nodes are separate, so we'll be okay there. And yeah, then we do if we actually don't need the position here, I think. Because we can also, like, if we update connections for nodes that are going to be removed by moving, that's actually fine. Because these pointers only go one way, so. Yeah, I think we only need to go over all the nodes. So that makes this node. Actually, in Rust, is that how you do that? You do Rust. Hash map values. Is there like a values mute? Yeah, there is a values mute. Great. Because that's actually, I think, what we want. Values mute. Let's just go over the actual nodes. So yeah, so if the input port connection dot node. So it's if the selected nodes dot contains, that's going to be a reference, then input port connection dot node is, and then we need to update this position. And that's this code. But instead of self model node root pos, this will be input port connection dot node dot pos. No, just dot node. So yeah, so if for all the nodes, if any of their connections point to nodes that are part of the selection, then we need to update that node with this move. And this is definitely safe, because then if the node that we just updated gets removed, that's fine, because the connections only go one way. And then we also know all these are going to survive, so they're going to point to valid nodes after this for sure. So that's good. The difference is that we might have some connections that point to nodes that are going to be overwritten. That's what we need to remove. So I'm not sure the best way to do that. We pull out these nodes, for example. You know, I guess we can do it as part of this loop. We definitely need to do it after we figure out the nodes that are going to move. Figure out the nodes that are going to move, and then we do this, and then we clear the selection. That's fine, and then we insert the new nodes. So I think right before that, we're going to do this. And for this, we need to go, let's see, for pause in moved nodes.iter. So these are all the new positions. And this is going to get a bit crap because we need to loop over all the nodes then to figure out which ones we need to update. But I think that's actually fine. So we're going to do for... Actually, let's go the other way then. For node in self.model.nodes.values.mute. And we're going to do the same thing for input port connection in node.input port connections.iter mute. What we can do is if wait a minute. This might not be enough because this will existing nodes to nodes that will be removed. We also need to do do this for nodes that are moved? I don't think we do actually, because we don't need to break any connections for nodes that moved. Well, yeah, we do. Yeah, because we can have the case where there's a node that's not in the selection that points to a node that we move the selection over, and we need to break connections to that other one that we're going to remove. And we also have the case where one of these nodes points to a node that wasn't part of the selection, and if we move it over that node's going to go away. So we also need to do this for the nodes that will be moved. So that's true. So we're going to end up doing this twice, and I'm just going to literally do the code twice. Yeah, Drew too. I actually normally work with half this area, but for the demo tool, I touch a lot of files at once, so I use the full screen real estate. Normally I have like docs and stuff on the left. And also it's a bit less than that because the chat. So the chat's finally immortalized for once. Also, hi, by the way. So yeah, so if the moved nodes dot contains key, yeah, this will be input port connection dot node. And then we actually want to remove the input port connection altogether. So we have to change this loop. So just get it. Actually, we don't really need to, well, we'll do this anyway, just to make the code more readable. Then we want to do is it remove? It's not that one. There's also swap remove, which is kind of fun if we don't care about ordering, but I do actually want this to respect ordering as much as we can. So we'll remove I. And then we'll continue the loop if that's the case. Don't like how this code looks, but it's fine for now. But did I do this right? Yeah, for all the nodes that are pointing to a node that the move node is going to overwrite. Yeah, I did this right. So this will be in move nodes.values mute, which I think is what I want to do. And I think it's okay to do this immutable borrow here because it doesn't outlive this immutable one. So I think this is okay. Might not be. We'll have to see. If not, I guess I can clone the positions, for example. Okay, we'll try that. I think that's what I want. 568. Oh, didn't like that one. Yeah, that's actually exactly what I described. Okay, let's be cheeky here. Positions is move nodes dot keys dot clones dot collect into a vec. Oh yeah, now that's just a vec. It's just going to be contains. And actually, we can collect this into, for example, a hash set, which is a bit better, I think. And that will be contains. Oh, no worries, that entropy. I don't mind. It's okay. I was a bit too in my head to respond. I wasn't intentionally ignoring to because of that rule or anything. Look at that. So that didn't work. And the reason is because this logic actually is wrong. Because you can see anything that's in this moved set, it removed that. And that's not what we want, actually. So it did correctly update the pointers here. But it did not correctly handle... Oh, I just realized the selection thing is drawn over the lines. Maybe that's what I want. I don't know. Yes, this actually works. As long as nothing points to this main node here. That's fun. But because this was in this move nodes, that did not work. Oh yeah, because actually this is wrong. This actually shouldn't check for the move nodes here. This should see if self.model.nodes contains this. Which means it's going to be overwritten. Because here we go through the model nodes and see if any of these are going to be overwritten by the move nodes. And here we go through the move nodes and see if they're going to overwrite any of the model nodes. That's how that's different. I probably need to come up with a better way to do this. Now this probably should be contains key, and we got rid of that clone, which is nice. I'm pretty liberal with like cloning these kind of structures. These model sizes here are like naturally not very large because we're building 64Ks, so they're very practically bound. At least the size. Ooh, that is not what I wanted. Okay. So now it works actually to maintain the connections within that. But connections to these moved ones didn't work, so I did something wrong here. A bit confused with this logic. So let's just read through this again. So go through the original nodes and all their connections. And if any of the connections point to nodes that are in the selection, then we update those connections with how we know the selection is going to move. So they're going to point to where those nodes are going to be. So I think this is valid. The next thing we do is we pull out the move nodes from the original thing, and we also move them to where they're going to be. So now the connections that are going to point to these, for example, should all be valid. Although these are not part of the model yet. And then if this root position needs to move, we move that. I'm very confident in that. And then we actually clear the selection. So now we have the move nodes in their new positions in this structure, while the original model nodes contains only the other nodes. And both the move nodes and these model nodes might have connections that point to model nodes that might be overwritten by these move nodes. So those are what we need to clear. So first we remove connections in the model nodes to nodes that are going to be removed, to other model nodes that will be removed. So Ooh, okay, yeah, this conflicts with this. That's something that's wrong, because this checks if this connection is pointing to, if this updated connection is pointing to one of these other ones. Yeah, I think there's got to be a better way to do this as an algorithm. And same with this. This is why this removes all the connections, because this checks these if these point to nodes here with this move nodes thing. But like this doesn't differentiate if a node used to point to a node that the move nodes is going to overwrite, or if it points to the node that we're going to move into there. That's the mistake that I'm making here. So what's, I guess the easy way might be to go like, so here we're iterating over all the nodes, and we're going to see if the nodes point to this. The move nodes contains that. And I should probably also say if the move nodes contain that and the existing nodes contains that. I think that's actually what I need. So which might be a problem here because of this borrow, but we'll figure that out. Yeah, so this is saying that if there's an existing node there, that actually still doesn't work for the updated connections. So I think that's wrong. It's a finicky kind of model to update, but I feel like this is the hard part, and once I solve this, it won't be hard anymore for any of the other things that we're doing. So I'm just dealing with it. Paste, I think, is also going to have to deal with this. I may also change the model to make this easier, but I think I'll fight through this and solve it and then see how complicated it actually gets. So what if I don't update these yet? I just have to sit here and thank you guys. I think what I want to do is this. I think I want to do this at the end. Update the existing connections after we've inserted these new nodes. And we can be cheeky, like let original selected nodes is selected nodes dot clone, for example. And then we can do this. So we pull out the ones we're going to move. And we update everything. And then we break all the connections. Because at this point we know that all the nodes are pointing to nodes that have not been moved yet. That's probably a better way to do this. You know, another way we could do this actually is we could keep track of whenever we want to insert a node, we could keep track to see if there was a node that was already there. If that's actually what I'm thinking. If there's a node already there that isn't being moved. Yeah, I'm not sure. I like the idea of breaking all the connections, then moving the nodes, then updating all of the connections after we've moved in the new nodes. I like that idea, however I want to do that. So this first part here, we basically like determine nodes to move and new positions, and then update root pos if applicable. Then we're gonna existing selection, which we don't necessarily need to do here actually, because we really need to do it here. Clear the existing selection, and then we reinsert moved nodes and update selection. And then here we should update all remaining connections to moved nodes. That's what I want to describe. And so then here what we want to do is we want to break all connections to nodes that will be, actually I'm going to keep this commented code because it might be useful, but yeah. So I guess actually one way we can do it is we can collect all the nodes that we know are going to be removed by the move. So we can do that. So let's start with that kind of query. Hash set. Because we don't actually care about these nodes. They'll just die. We only care about the positions. So we'll go through all of the nodes for pos in self dot model. I mean, this could go either way, but I think it's, let's go into the move nodes because those are the only ones going to overwrite nodes and see if other nodes are there. So if we do moved nodes dot keys, then we can do if self dot model dot nodes dot contains key with this position. Then we'll do removed nodes dot push pos dot clone. Actually, this should be insert. Okay. I like calling these overwritten nodes. I think that's good. Yeah, I think this is the right order of operations here. So then we'll just work on these parts here. So for all the nodes that aren't in the move nodes, that's what we go over here. We can determine if any of their positions points to the overwritten nodes. Then we'll get rid of it. And the exact same thing for this, which I think can make sense. Yeah, and these are just a set now. So instead of contains key, it'll just be contains. No, I think it works. You can see there, I took this, if we have like these 4 nodes here, I can take this one and move it over this one, which will remove this connection and this connection as well as this node. But it retained this connection. So this works. I might want to draw like temporary connections while I move the nodes. Also, you can see that this linear representation looks really bad. So I'll probably change that too. But those are fairly basic cosmetic things that I'm not too concerned about. As long as we can move these, that's really great. And yeah, undoing everything, of course, works because we just clone the entire model. Oops. Not implemented. Yeah, I haven't implemented deleting nodes. So that actually makes sense. I just have such a habit of using the tool that I hit that button without thinking about it. So I'm going to add a quick commit to this. Yeah, I may not commit this now, actually, because there's a lot of changes still left to do. But at least this part, I think, will work. So maybe implementing that deletion is actually a good idea. I also have no idea how I'm gonna handle like managing connections in the editor yet. I need to figure that out. Right now, just moving them around I think is helpful, obviously, but delete selection, for example, needs to handle the nodes case. Cut selection we'll get to. Cut and copy, because those need serialization. which I don't want to do yet. And same with paste, needs deserialization. So we'll do that in one go. Luckily, the serialization code is shared with the serialization code for saving and loading the project. So I'll probably do save and load first and then use that to implement cut, copy, and paste. But delete is different because delete is, we just delete the selection. And so for here, we need to clear all of the connections. So we'll remove connections that refer to selected nodes, and then we'll remove the nodes. I'm just doing this because it's easier, this first part. Self.model.nodes.remove, pause. And then for the connections, then it's for node in, we don't care about the positions here. For node in self.model.nodes.values mute. And we can copy some of the code that iterates over this. And I may refactor some of this too, because like we copy this code to remove a connection or all the connections, for example, and that is probably going to be something that's pretty common. So we'll do this. I think this is fine. And this is a bit conservative. This might remove connections from nodes that are going to be removed, but that's fine. The simplest way is the way that I want, whatever that's going to be. Did I call this selected ops? Yeah, that's selected nodes. Silly me. Oops. So now if I delete, that should be fine. I think backspace will do the same. And it does, which is great. I guess worst case, what I can do is I can do like right click remove for a lot of these connections, which isn't going to be a great experience probably, but we'll have to see. I kind of hate making these kind of node editors. I just think it's the right interface, so I'm dealing with it anyway. Yeah, sorry, Bobby. This is a kind of an unusual stream. Normally I only have, right now there's a 4K display and the text is like 11 point. Normally I use just the top right 1080 portion and then bump up the font size for you guys. But since I'm working on editor stuff, I'm just gonna make it comfortable for me. So just know this isn't the normal way I do this. But yeah, it's a known issue for today's stream. But yeah, that's 2 features down basically. It's readable for me. That's the priority today. Yeah, it looks like the mini map, doesn't it? That's great. As long as the code looks good from this view, I'm happy about that. So I'm thinking that I might add a helper for this modification that I'm doing here, where for every node in like a node collection here, I remove connections that refer to another node in some other collection. Hey, Code Musings. Yeah, I'm actually going to save this refactoring job. I think I'm not going to do that right now. I think I might actually tackle the rendering of these connections, because this just really bugs me. It bugs me a lot more than I thought. I wonder if there's like even just a way to anti-alias that line. Yeah, I think the sauce in the tool is not actually that secret. I don't really care too much about showing that. The compressor I kind of do. Even though I gave away most of the secrets in my revision seminar. Yeah, I think my monitor is a 42.5 inch. It's pretty beefy. And I got it while working on this tool originally. That's kind of fun. It's funny actually that I have this view to like touch a lot of files, and I've only been working in one. That's the irony. What was I gonna look at? It's C++ and Rust. C++ for the very top level code, which is all cute, and then Rust for all the data model code. That's what's gonna look up. Cube Painter, draw line, anti-alias. I think I have another tab here about curves, which I might consider as well. Oops. These take like a render hint, for example? I don't think so. It might just be what I get. These kind of lines, which is fine. Let's actually just try to draw them as a curve, see what I get. I think that sounds fun. So, like all these things are little custom editors. Where I just do this drawing by hand, which is not too bad. Yeah, Squishy's written in Rust, as are our actual intros. The parts of our intros that are not written in Rust is the synth, and that's all C++. And that's because of the fact that I started the synth before I started using Rust. I started the synth in 2012, actually. It was a long time ago. And I started using Rust in 2015. And then I started this tool chain for doing 64Ks in 2016. So basically everything since I started using Rust that I've done is in Rust, because I like it a lot. So for these connections, I think I just draw them here. Yeah, draw a line. Now, I've never actually used this path stuff. It looks like this draws from 0, 0. So it's cubic 2. There's a current position. I think I need to do like a set position or something before I do anything else. I don't work with cute nearly as much as I should. And I'm okay with that. It's one of those things that I'm happy to only touch when I have to. Move to, that's what I need. That's Q real. Oh, it's like double. Okay. Yeah, because I think I need to do that. I think I need to make one of these Q. Yeah, Q painter path. And then I need to make the path and then draw the path with the painter. So Q path, and I think I probably have to include that as well. Yeah, I'm generally impressed with Qt. I don't know of anything that's like, even if you ignore the cross-platform stuff, I don't really know of anything that's this comprehensive. That's available to use for free that really works. And isn't C# or something. I mean, obviously, if I had started these tools more recently, I might have chosen ImGUI. I probably wouldn't have actually, because every time I try it, I find I don't like it very much. But I like the idea at least. Yeah, there's the controls in the endpoint, so also this will take reals like this, which is nice, because then I can just do like this and do dest pixel x dest pixel y. I guess the easy way to test this is just this, which is crap, but at least that would render something. And one of the nice things actually about having this set up like this is that if I'm only changing the C++ stuff, it's actually pretty fast to rebuild. Yeah, so now I have some curves. And you can see that we didn't clear the brush. So we need to do that. I think I didn't do that because I was just drawing lines before. But since now we're doing both, we should set the brush. So painter.set brush, and I think it's just cute, no brush. And then we want to fix the actual control points. And I'm not entirely sure what I want to do for that. I think what I've done typically is like use some kind of midway point as the control points. So we do like source pixel X here and dest pixel X here. And then we'll do like, I don't know, const auto mid point Y is dest pixel Y minus, we actually want to add them. So source pixel Y plus dest pixel Y divided by 2. And then I think this will work. Now, I don't normally like to have casts that are implicit in my code. But I'm doing it now because of laziness. This looks fine. Looks a bit strange when it goes up like this, maybe. That's not that bad, actually. Yeah, I think that's fine. And the nice part about doing this is the curve is entirely contained within this rectangle between the 2 points. And that's really nice because what you can do is here I have a to-do about this, but it's to calculate the bounding rectangle and see if we can cull drawing the line if it doesn't intersect with this event rect. And that's actually a really important optimization, even in like the operator editor that I have here. It gets a lot faster if you do that. So in this operator editor, for example, it's only going to draw operators if they intersect with this rectangle, and that's easy to make. So you just literally do this node rect, and so this will be like this. Whoops! I always do that. I hit like. Yeah. I always hide this Explorer on accident, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so node rect, we'll do connection rect. And again, this is source pixel Y. Now, I actually don't know. I should actually make sure this is correct. This is Q rect. Yeah, because this is X, Y, width, and height. Or like top, left, bottom, right. And we actually should determine this more properly. So like, let's say in top left is type min. Cute min. This cute global thing, isn't it? Yeah, Q min, Q max, I'll use those. And so we'll do source pixel X, dest pixel X, and top. Actually, this will be left. We'll do top, left, bottom, right, TRVL. Top is Q min. Actually, I'll do left, top, right, bottom. I like that ordering. And bottom, no, right. I'll just copy these actually. And these will be Q max in this case. And then, so this becomes left, top, right minus left, and bottom minus top. And the event rect we get from this draw function here as part of the event. And that represents the visible area that's being drawn. So in this way we can cull for speed, which it's a bit preliminary to do this optimization now, but why not? And this definitely still works, so that's great. Cool. It still looks alias to me. In fact, I can check with snip. Or not, maybe. Yeah, it's definitely aliased. This is what the nodes look like, by the way, guys. Since I know you couldn't see them before. Just render hint. Where's this used? Ah, you set them. Okay. You know, I actually think that it probably doesn't make much small. I mean, we don't create the path if we call it. That's really the optimization. I think that's actually why this was so much better when I added clipping by hand, is because like this did a lot of pen and brush and like string measurement and stuff. So it probably doesn't make much of a difference to do it here, but I'm still going to keep the code anyway. Anyway, it looks like we need to, for example, set one of these hints. We can try this. Now, generally, I actually don't want this turned on because I've been very happy with the rendering so far. So I think we want to do this. What was it? Set render hint. And then we'll set it to false after this. I don't remember which extension I use for VS Code, actually. This didn't work, did it? Can I open editor? Oh yeah, because I'm running it, huh? That's a fun mistake that I make way too often. That's better. And I just want to make sure that I always have this set to what I expect. Heranza, yeah, font's real small today. Just because I'm doing tool work. This is unusual for me, but I do it sometimes. Yeah, now one of the things I don't like about this is that now that anti-aliasing is on, we get these really soft lines when it's like straight vertical. That sucks, I think. And I'm guessing it's actually because we need to like offset by half a pixel or something. I'm going to try that. just going to do this. Do it the lazy way first and see if it works, and then we can make it nice after or not, because I might just not care. Yeah, exactly, Renzo. That's what we're working on, is the new node view, which is going to be nice. Yeah, there it goes. That fixed it. So that was the issue. Yeah, so I had this operators view before, and now I'm adding a node view that compiles down to these operators to be able to like more easily compose scenes and stuff. And this is how far I am so far. And everything's still on a grid, both because I like the aesthetic and also because it makes it easier to build an editor. So I like that. No, the nodes are not represented in the timeline. They actually get compiled down to these operators, which could mean a lot of different things. So in this case, like the way that they're compiled is going to be determined by like as part of the project. So in this case, I expect the root node to be compiled down to a subroutine, which is something that this operator grid supports. And I call it here, for example. And that subroutine will call other subroutines that are defined in the operator grid to make a scene, for example. So I haven't entirely figured out how I want scenes to be represented on the timeline eventually. But I do know that I want to have clips that modify variables, and one of them might be a scene select variable, but I think I want to do something a bit fancier for like selecting scenes, for example. But yeah. So it's a bit more abstract, I guess. But the idea is that like this node, for example, represents a scene. This is a root node that would represent multiple scenes. This is a cube that's in this scene. This is a material that's on that cube. So it's not so much a replacement as a level of abstraction on top of the other view, I would say. So the operators are still there to like work on like low level rendering and stuff. And top level stuff will be there for actually composing real things. That's the idea. And all that gets compiled down to a bytecode that ships in the intros, along with a JIT that runs when you run the intro. And that's how our tool works. I think now's a good time to commit some stuff, actually. Another thing about this this node view that I haven't figured out yet, which I'm probably just gonna make configurable, is the colors. You guys probably can't see it at all because they're just tiny. But the bottom of the operators have this little gradient at the bottom, and it's color coded for different types of nodes or different types of operators. And it's a bit subtle, but I like how it looks. And I added the same gradient to the nodes, so I'm thinking that the node definitions would expose what kind of color they should be, for example. So yeah. Anyway, this might actually be a good time to stop, so I'm not streaming for too much longer than 2 hours. So I talked a lot and I got a bit done. So yeah, I think I'll head out. Anyway, thanks guys for hanging out. I hope to do a more normal stream soon because I kind of want to finish this node editor stuff. And once the editor work is done, then I can actually start using it for interesting things. So that'll be cool. Anyway, thanks guys for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.